As you've been going through your day, have you been having this recurring feeling that maybe something in your life isn't quite right? It isn't quite going the way that you want it to go? Well, maybe you need to pivot. So today we're going to be talking to you about what a life pivot even is, how to know if now's the right time for you to pivot, and then how you can actually pivot your life.
Hi, I'm Joseph.
And I'm Tasha with One Big Happy Life, and we help you find balance, build wealth, and live happy. Everything that you need to create the life that you want.
2020 has been quite a year. All of us have experienced some changes. Most of us have experienced gigantic changes, and a lot of it has been entirely out of our control. And so as our lives are changing, this can help reveal some friction points and some things that we were feeling about our lives that we didn't even know were going on, or created some new things.
To share a personal story, so this week we lost our childcare for the second time in 2020.
Like, what are those odds?
Yeah. And, we sat down and we were like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Because it was very unexpected. And initially, we were going to just follow the same path we had always followed before, which is, oh my gosh, start checking all the usual places, the websites. Let's find a new nanny to come to the house to watch Reeves so that Joseph can work, so that I could work. But we made the decision to pivot, to do something dramatically different from what we had ever done before, at least purposefully, which is to explore what it would be like to not have any childcare and to balance childcare with work and running a business. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is that we are going to hire for the first time a full-time employee that's not related to us, right? So we're going to hire a full-time employee in the business to give me more time to spend with Reeves, so I don't have to spend as many hours working. So that is a huge pivot that we are going to be going through over the next, honestly, like 6 months as we hire and onboard someone. And so we thought that now would be a great time to talk to you about how you can identify those areas in your life where it may make sense for you to pivot, and then how to actually execute a pivot in your life.
So first, what is a pivot? Well, a pivot is just a change in your trajectory. Essentially, one or more areas in your life just really isn't fitting the way who you are right now and what you want to be achieving. And so then a pivot gets you back on track or changes that trajectory to something that does work with who you are and what you want to be achieving now.
Yeah, a clear example of that was when I quit being a banking and finance attorney a year ago to run our business, One Big Happy Life, full time. But also that example that I just gave about what we're doing with Reeves, that's a pivot. And it affects multiple areas of our lives. Like one, it affects or it touches on our need and want to actually spend more time with our son, to be an active part of his day, an active part of his learning, to build more memories of him, to take advantage of an opportunity that we might never get again. I mean, I guess we can always homeschool, but he'll never be 4 again, right? But it also pivots us financially as well, because we're not going to be spending as much on childcare. And it's a business pivot as well, because now our business is about to have a full-time employee. So that's a lot of shifts in trajectories that we're making with one seemingly like innocuous life decision.
Yeah, and not every pivot has to be monumental and grand. It could be something small. So don't think just because you don't feel like changing careers or anything like that, well, you don't need a pivot. You still might want to, even if it's not gigantic. So how do you know if you need a pivot? Well, a couple of things that you might be experiencing. So think about, reflect on your life. Are you feeling repeated burnout? So burnout at home, burnout at work, where that symptom that every general illness comes with, like a cold. It's like general malaise. Like, are you feeling that a lot, where you're not really excited about different aspects of your life, or you're never looking forward to going to work or something like that? Well, and you're like, oh, well, I always need a vacation, that kind of feeling. that's burnout. And if it's happening constantly, that can be an indication that you might need to be pivoting there.
Now, in full disclosure, right, 2020 has been a year, right? So I think that we're all feeling some amount of general malaise. I don't know that anyone has escaped the fallout of 2020 completely. It's been a heavy year. So, look for these other symptoms also that we're going to share with you, like frustrations or friction points that you keep bumping up against, and maybe are bumping up against them even more frequently because of all of the different changes that have happened in 2020, where, you can't gloss over these problems anymore. Like a boss that was annoying, well, you used to be able to escape them and go home, right? And not have to talk to them again. But now you work from home, and now they're even worse because you're trying to balance your kids with your workload, and they're not being accommodating. And so now those frustrations, those pain points, they're probably even more prominent than they've ever been before.
And it doesn't just have to be a pain point or like a negative feeling. You could have positive feelings about different things. So let's say that you're, find yourself daydreaming a lot more lately, and it's about doing things differently or doing a different kind of work. You're thinking about really changing your life already, but you're doing it in the form of dreaming about it instead of saying, gosh, I really don't like what's going on right now.
So those are some of the ways that you can see, like, where are the areas in my life where I might want to pivot. But so then the next step is deciding, okay, well, where exactly do I need to pivot? Because with any given problem, there are multiple solutions. There are multiple things that you can change and tweak in your life to fix the problem. So to give an example, before COVID, when Joseph used to commute 3 hours a day, so this past year where I've been working from home and not commuting, and Joseph was commuting, I started noticing that just how tired he was at the end of the day on his commutes. And he would talk about how he didn't have a lot of time, and when also in the context of having more children. And it's like, do we even have time for more children? And I would always give him pushback on that and say, look, the problem is not more children. The problem is that you have this crazy commute, and we live in a high cost of living area, which makes it more challenging for us to get close to your job so that you can get 2 whole hours of your day back.
Yeah, I mean, that actually has been huge. And it just occurred to me just now that, I mean, these friction points and pain points over commuting and how much time it was taking and how exhausted I was manifested in like a physical injury. So I tore my hamstring from overuse because I'm not getting enough rest trying to fit in some workouts because I wanted to do triathlons again. It's like, you should be able to work out and have a more athletic hobby if you want one. And basically it was taking just too much of a physical toll on me. But it's not because of the workouts. It's because of me having to get up super early to catch a train to get into work, because it takes me 3 hours to get there. So I always did it early. So like that, it's been painfully obvious to me this year.
So, and it's like we had all of these conversations around, okay, well, what are the possible solutions for this, right? And it could be moving closer into his job. And so that was one area that we could pivot in, where we live. Other options were, well, maybe you need to quit your job entirely and come work in the business. Now, that's a whole different kind of pivot, right? And that would have meant a lot of things for us financially. That would have put a lot of extra strain on the business. And so the point is, think about, where is the best place to put your focus for your pivot to solve the problem, and really try to get to the root of the problem. Like right now, a lot of people are struggling with balancing working from home with also helping to teach their kids and helping their kids with virtual learning, which is something that many of us have never had to do before. And it can be really easy to say, to get frustrated at our kids because they're right in front of us and teaching them is hard when we're trying to do that while balancing work, when really what we should be focused on is who are we working for that isn't giving us the grace and space and time and flexibility that we need in the midst of a whole crisis to try to keep our family running while also being the kind of professionals that we want to do and putting out the kind of work that we want to put out. And so the issue here is not the fact that we have a family and that we have kids. It's that we've built a system of, and we're working for maybe employers that don't respect the fact that people are whole people all the time.
Yeah, so now that you have identified that you need a pivot, how do you accomplish the pivot? Well, while you've been thinking about all the different friction points, and so you identified those and thought about, well, how are these affecting me? Then you're going to be starting to look for solutions and start with, what does your ideal scenario start to look like? What do you want your life to look like? That's an easy place to start. And then you kind of develop the ideal scenario, and then you can work back towards, well, what things need to change to get to that.
And before you even do that, it's really important to understand the friction point. What is the problem? What is it that you don't like about it? And how is that showing up in your life? And you want to be clear on this because you want to know what you're trying to get away from. You want to pick a solution that is actually going to solve your core problem. And you want to be aware of that core problem so that you don't accidentally drift back into that zone again someday because you got complacent because you fixed the problem using the rest of the steps we're about to give you right now.
So a great thing to do is to brainstorm potential solutions to those friction points and don't rule anything out. That's the first tip. I mean, as you're brainstorming, if you start ruling stuff out, you might miss things that are actually going to work out very, very well that you might never have considered before. So whatever pops in, think about it. And then, after you made your entire list, start thinking about the things that are easy to implement.
Yeah,
so,
on a scale of 1 to 10, how easy is it for you to just implement it immediately, with 1 being really easy and 10 being really hard? The other rating criteria, and you got to use both of these that you want to use, is to think about how excited are you by the potential solution on a scale of 1 to 10. Like 1, not particularly excited about it. 10, thrilled, overjoyed. That would be wonderful.
Now, it might be obvious from these that there are one or a couple of solutions that are just obvious, let's do the thing. But you might end up with something that is great in the short term and then another one that's going to be great in the long term. And so you can kind of balance, well, let's do the short term thing. And then ultimately, I definitely want to hit that long term thing. So it might be like, let's say something with shortening my commute. Well, maybe I can change up my telework schedule in the short term, but ultimately I leave my job in the long term. So that kind of scenario might look really appealing.
Yes. And it's okay if you don't have a long-term solution. So for us, we have not made a decision that long-term we will homeschool Reeves. We've definitely talked about it. Joseph will not let this RV life thing go. Like, he was talking about it today. Yes, because we were talking about 2 years from now renting out our house, right? And Joseph's like, well, we could just once Alexis leaves, we can just rent the house out immediately because she might actually go to college campus in the spring. And he's like, well, if she leaves, we leave. RV life. And I'm like, I don't know about that. But the point is that we have a plan that we feel comfortable with for at least the next 9 months. We are going to feel it out. This whole, pass off the things that I do in the business to someone else is a new thing. So it's going to be an experiment. And so you don't necessarily have to have the long-term plan. You can just focus short-term. But ideally, it's good to have a permanent fix in mind, if at all possible.
And then once you have all of those possible solutions and you're looking at what you're going to execute, then really create an action plan with discrete steps, concrete steps that I'm going to do this first. I'm going to do this second. And then also attach deadlines or at least goal timelines to, so you can make sure that you are on track. Because I just got to tell you, you cannot experience burnout just forever.
Yeah.
And super high performing, high successful people will tell you the same thing. There are CEOs that have just worked so hard for so long that they end up taking years off of work because they just ran themselves ragged just perpetually.
And you guys just heard the burnout lecture that Joseph gives me like every other week. Like that exact same word for word thing is what he tells me. So,
well, it's her own fault for letting. I overheard a podcast where a guy was talking about this, and I'm like, yeah. And so now it comes back, unfortunately, more frequently than we would like, which is again why we're doing this pivot, thinking not childcare now. Maybe it's more help in the business. So Tasha can actually get more time to do something different.
Yes. And so the last thing that you want to do, if there are other people that are going to be involved, if this is going to affect other people, your coworkers, your boss, your family members, your kids, let them know what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? Get their buy-in. You don't need their permission, but well, your boss, you might need their permission if you're switching that up at home.
Buy-in,
yeah. But yes. But if, of course, for your boss, you put it as like, this is what I'm going to do so I can be more efficient at work, so I can be more productive, so that I can make sure that I'm hitting all of my metrics and goals. This is the solution that I've come up with. And typically bosses won't be unhappy that you're taking initiative to make things work even better and to fit within, the parameters they've set out for you or whatever. But just get other people involved so that they know what you're doing, because what will happen is they're used to you showing up in a certain way. They're used to things going a certain way. And if you just switch it up on everyone and you don't tell anyone anything, they're going to keep showing up in the way that in those established routines, and you're going to get frustrated because you're trying to change and they're trying to pull you back to what you used to do. So get them involved, let them know what's happening so that you can make your transition as smooth as possible.
Now, I know that you're here because you want to live your financial dream life, and one of the best places to start is with a one-year spending plan. So head on over to oneBigHappyLife.com/spending plan to download our free spending plan template and start taking control of your money.
All right, good luck taking a look at your life, deciding if a pivot's for you, and then executing any pivot that you find you need.
All right.
It's going to be great.
We'll see you guys in the next video.
Bye.
Bye.